I've heard it illustrated this way. A man is on death row. He's scheduled to be executed tomorrow. Today, he gets to order whatever he wants for his last meal. Now, when he's deciding what to order, do you think he's going to concern himself with how much sugar is in that meal? Or sodium or carbs or whatever? No way. He has no future health to concern himself about. His only concern right now is whatever pleasure he can obtain immediately at the moment. Illustrating what? Well, a number of people actually feel very much like that man on death row, because they reason, well, how long do we live? 70, 80 years? Life is short. So why are we going to concern ourselves with the future? The thing we want to do is obtain as much pleasure as we can out of life right now. And that mindset has led a number of people into a lifestyle of instant gratification. The essence of that is do the fun things first. You play now, work later. Do whatever makes you feel good now, worry about consequences later. Instant gratification. But there is a number of reasons to beware of instant gratification. Studies show that even in this relatively short life, those who generally opt to take care of pleasure first, they're unhappier and they're less successful. Now, what about those who delay gratification? Now, here's the person who takes care of business first and enjoys his relaxation later. It's a way of life, right? Well, studies show that these people are happier and they are more successful in the things they set out to do. Thus, a reason to beware of instant gratification.
Yes, beware instant gratification, so says Ed Aljian, a Bethelite from the Warwick, New York headquarters of Jehovah's Witnesses. He's taking the first item on the Saturday afternoon session of this year's Exercise Patience Convention, titled Why Beware of Instant Gratification. And right out of the blocks, it seems that Ed Aljian is arguing strongly against hedonism. He doesn't like the philosophy of pleasure being a purpose for living in and of itself. And to illustrate his thinking on this, he's given this illustration of the person on death row who isn't going to concern himself with whether his meal is unhealthy, with whether his meal has too much fat or too much sugar or too many carbs. Look, I suppose my problem is not with any philosophical stance against hedonism. I personally am quite sympathetic to hedonism. I think there's nothing wrong with enjoying life and with pleasure being a purpose in and of itself, because life is so short. There's no proof that it continues once we die. There's no proof that any all-wise, all-knowing, all-powerful deity is going to help us cheat death and attain some bliss afterwards. So yes, I think in moderation, it's good to have a bit of a hedonistic attitude. The difference for Ed Aljian is that that doesn't square with the indoctrination he's pushing in this talk. Instant gratification is a no-no for Jehovah's Witnesses because it runs directly counter to the control that the organization wants to wield over members. If you have millions of Jehovah's Witnesses who see no problem whatsoever with getting pleasure now, in the here and now, with pursuing a lifestyle that brings them happiness, then you have a worldwide following who will be less likely to take seriously your demands for obedience and loyalty and submitting yourself to this hamster wheel of constant activity to further the interests of the organization, even if it's at the expense of your happiness or gratification in the here and now. And as a basis for his argument, as a reason why Jehovah's Witnesses should forego happiness and gratification in the here and now, Ed Aljian wants us to consider studies.
You know, studies show that even in this relatively short life, those who generally opt to take care of pleasure first, they're unhappier and they're less successful.
Yes, trust me, folks. I've done my research here. There are studies on this. I'm not going to give you any citations. I'm not going to give you any names or dates or any references that can be verified. Just trust me that there are studies that back up everything that I'm saying. Look, what he's saying, what Ed Aljian is arguing, isn't entirely without merit. I just think that he's coming at this from an extremely black and white position. In other words, either you are into instant gratification, as he puts it, either you are wholly hedonistic to the point of being self-destructive, to the point of living your life without any regard whatsoever for the consequences, or you are doing things properly and completely rejecting the principle of instant gratification. You are putting success and your future interests ahead of the here and now. I think there's somewhere in between. I don't think things are anywhere near as black and white as this Bethelite is suggesting. But let's hear him out. Let's hear what else he has to say about the world's attitude to instant gratification.
The devil exploits the seeming brevity of life to intensify the temptation to sin. Or let me put it this way. Some forms of instant gratification lead right into sinning against Jehovah. And you and I don't want that. But it can happen in two ways. Some pleasures can be appropriately obtained, maybe even in this system, but not right away. For example, Jehovah requires that we postpone sexual relations until we're married, waiting. Also, other pleasures are entirely off limits, like the misuse of drugs or the misuse of alcohol, even though they might deliver some immediate pleasure. So these are strong reasons to beware of instant gratification. Here's another strong reason. Can we go to 1 John chapter 2? 1 John 2:17, furthermore, the world is passing away, and so is its desire. But the one who does the will of God remains forever. So the world is on death row. But those who are serving Jehovah, he holds out this reward of everlasting life in the new world where all of our proper desires will be completely fulfilled. This prospect takes us off of death row. It means we don't have to go through life thinking this is my last meal. In fact, we do go through life making sure that we don't forfeit that beautiful reward of everlasting life just because we want to get something out of life right now. Nor do we want to do anything that distances us from our loving God who holds out that everlasting future to us. So what are we saying, really? What are we saying? Are we saying that all forms of instant gratification are wrong? Not necessarily, not in every case. But often it is.
Not in every case. But yeah, that's mostly what we're saying. Oh, bless him. So yes, Ed Aljian giving us a little bit more flesh on the bones when it comes to his view and the organization's view of instant gratification. And unsurprisingly, when he's thinking about the ways that you can screw up in life, the ways that you can live in a way that is self-destructive, he's immediately going to sex, drugs, and alcohol.
For example, Jehovah requires that we postpone sexual relations until we're married, waiting. Also, other pleasures are entirely off limits, like the misuse of drugs or the misuse of alcohol, even though they might deliver some immediate pleasure.
So there you have it, plain as day. It's mostly about sexual repression, isn't it? That's mostly where his mind is going to when he's talking about instant gratification. He is representing in this talk an organization that wants to police people's lives, that wants to micromanage people, even in such intimate areas as the bedroom, as sexuality. And this is an organization that, quite frankly, is more obsessed with policing what consenting adults do sexually between themselves than policing the cover-up of abuse or abuse itself. They're more interested in clamping down on people's healthy sex lives than making sure that their organization is free from criminals and making sure that criminals get reported to the authorities. That's how twisted things are. I mean, when we're talking about drugs and alcohol, I mean, obviously, I think we can all agree that he's onto something there, that you can pay a price for having a wholly hedonistic outlook when it comes to any form of substance abuse. You can pay a very, very heavy price, in fact. It can kill you to be an alcoholic or to be addicted to drugs. But you don't need to be a Jehovah's Witness to know this, do you? You just need to be a thinking adult with a modicum of intelligence to know that if you give yourself over to drugs and booze, you're going to end up in a bad place. That's just objectively the case. That's something that the world advocates against if we're thinking about health organizations and that sort of thing. So he isn't offering us any unique wisdom. It seems to me patently obvious that this is mostly about sex and policing people's sex lives. And then he comes out with this absolute gem about the world being on death row.
So the world is on death row. But those who are serving Jehovah, he holds out this reward of everlasting life in the new world where all of our proper desires will be completely fulfilled. This prospect takes us off of death row.
Does he need to say it any more clearly? You are on death row if you're not one of Jehovah's Witnesses. Irrespective of your philosophy when it comes to hedonism or instant gratification, you're on death row if you're not living your life according to the Jehovah's Witness organization and its demands and its requirements to police people's lives. That's the organization we're dealing with. And even though Edward Aljian projects this image of being this fairly sweet, reasonable, grandfatherly figure who's imparting wisdom, what he's actually imparting in this talk is some incredibly toxic, incredibly controlling, and incredibly black and white cult thinking that is intended not to help people, not to give people a healthy attitude towards pleasure and happiness and hedonism or gratification. This talk is intended to funnel people towards an organization intent on controlling them.